In a year of several Pinocchio films, it might have been necessary to officially name this one Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, but that's also fitting. The Mexican auteur's signature is all over the place. From the fantastical story elements to the protagonist's resemblance to Frankenstein's monster, what drew him to the story is obvious, and the stunning stop-motion animation craftsmanship makes it clear why he has chose to tell it this way. It naturally adapts to both subject and medium, and it's possible to just focus on the art and be in love. But this narrative also makes key adaptation decisions that fundamentally change how the story works. What was once a lesson for children, namely boys, is now for their parents, namely fathers. Pinocchio is sure to impress with the power of cinema, but whether the emotion succeeds will depend in part on whether the viewer identifies more with a parent or a child. Told in the soothing tones of Sebastian J. Cricket, Pinocchio begins with a prologue worthy of a tragedy. In World War I Italy, Geppetto is happy, respected and devoted to his absolutely adorable son Carlo. Then the boy dies in a war-related accident and the poor woodcarver breaks down. Years pass until one night, in a drunken rage, Geppetto decides to bring him back. He cuts down the pine tree planted in Carlo's honor and begins to make it into a puppet facsimile of his lost child. He mumbles that he will finish the puppet in the morning, passes out, and while he is sleeping, the forest spirit appears. After observing and taking pity on the grieving man, she brings up life in Geppetto's creation and hires Sebastian to lead him down the path of good. That last part is the one everyone is familiar with, but the differences in how it happens are significant. In this adaptation, no one but the forest spirit really wanted Pinocchio to stay alive. Geppetto wakes up to find his puppet has become a joyful, destructive whirlwind and is scared. Cricket agrees to be his conscience after being promised a wish for his troubles. Pinocchio himself is visibly rude, showing his otherness in a way that establishes him as part of Del Toro's monster canon, and the townspeople react to him with fear and rejection. However, when the shock wears off, everyone who meets him sees Pinocchio for what he could be, rather than what he is, a cash cow for devious showman Count Volpe, an immortal soldier for the city's fascist Podesta, and for the second coming of Geppetto Carlo. But even when it tries to assume these forms, which is always a short-lived undertaking, the puppet can only be itself. What he wants most to become more than a real boy is to be loved and accepted. So the journey of moral growth is really Geppetto's, and just as the original story was an example of bad boy behavior, Del Toro sets his sights on bad fathers. Volpe and the Podesta are two examples, and not only for their relationship with Pinocchio. The showman has adopted a monkey named Spazzatura, which is, significantly, the Italian word for garbage. He abuses trash, both physically and verbally, praising just enough to turn her approval into an addiction. The Podesta itself has a son, Lucignolo, whose name also becomes an expression of the cruelty of the parents. The fascist prefect is demanding in his attempt to mold his son in his image, an ideal Candlewick could never achieve even if it suited him. Spazzatura and Candlewick regard Pinocchio, the apple of their father's eye, with intense jealousy, and the scars of their parental relationship threaten to consume them. The environment becomes decisive for this reading. Fascism as an ideology is presented as a distorted form of paternalism, with Italy as its fatherland and its male citizens as its son. While the Podesta hammers Candlewick, Benito Mussolini twists his country. Religion plays a key role here too. Geppetto and Carlo were working on the massive crucifix in the town church when the boy died, and until Pinocchio came on the scene it remained unfinished. The wayward puppet is employed for some qualitative social criticism in both the political and religious arenas, but Jesus as a symbol is important in a more sincere way. Unlike the priest, he is a son that people look to for guidance, and that is ultimately what Del Toro's film teaches its audience. A good father does not see his son as something to be changed according to his wishes or desires, but as someone to learn from and inevitably change for. Of course, that's a fraction of what can be said about Del Toro's new film. Reward repetition and further reflection, and it will likely take some time to fully detach from the seemingly simple story. But one's experience at this point depends in part on how strongly one identifies with Geppetto and the film's explorations of death and grief. Some will call Pinocchio a moving masterpiece, others an interesting, stunningly crafted and ultimately sweet take on a well-known classic. Either way, it's a beautiful work by one of cinema's foremost artists, and it's always something to be thankful for. Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio debuts on Netflix on Friday, December 9th after a limited theatrical release. The film is 117 minutes long and is rated PG for its dark thematic material, violence, danger, some crude humor, and brief smoking. Our rating, 4 out of 5. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and support my channel.